Premier, in your affidavit to try and get a judge to order the Crowns back to work, you use the term harrowing in terms of your assessment of what effect this strike is having on the court system. Given that, why would you extend or take away the right to arbitration and replace it with the right to strike?
I believe the bill provides within the essential service component that is not available today as well. It provides a 7-day notice that would be required before a strike can begin.
Did you ever believe them to use that right to strike?
Well, that would be a silly question for them.
Did you extend, when you signed the last contract with the Crowns and you extended the framework, did you have any intention of ever letting them use the right to arbitration?
We were in the process of going through that. I never imagined that a 17% pay raise would ever be on the table. I don't think any reasonable person would suggest that a 17% pay raise over 4 years, one that their position that they stated. As I said on the floor of the House, we went and provided what we believe was a fair wage pattern. It wasn't accepted. We went back and started collapsing steps, which provided an upward jump for every 2/3 of the Crowns immediately. To find an agreement. They were looking to go directly to arbitration. They were using that clause, quite frankly, not to bargain. And we weren't going to, we wanted to bargain.
So the problem for you was not that they were exercising a contractual right, but that you didn't like the way they were choosing to exercise it.
No, the right fact of the matter is that I have a responsibility for all taxpayers, not just
Right,
Crowns.
but they had a contractual right. They were choosing to exercise it. You decided you didn't like it, and so you brought in legislation. I'm trying to understand for future negotiations, because you're in the midst of them with teachers and doctors, and you're going there with others soon. What should people expect when it comes to signing a contract? Will you honor the contract as it's written, or only if it's interpreted by the employee the way you wish it to be?
They were using arbitration as to hold the taxpayer hostage. No matter how else you cut it. You can describe it, you can however you wish. Walk in on day one with 17% no adjustment, wanting free park and a whole bunch of other things, not moving. The next day, wanting to go directly to arbitration. They were using that clause to hold the taxpayer of this province hostage.
So in your view, a right is not a right?
I have a responsibility to provide to all taxpayers, including providing those who are in collective agreements, the right to speak to exercise if they don't agree with what government is doing. That's why we're providing the right to strike.
So in your view, a right is not a right. It's only a right if you are happy with the way they're interpreting their right.
It's not a question because what do you do when you use a tactical move against a taxpayer
Why
in the
give
province?
them the right if you're not going to let them use it?
I think any reasonable person, quite frankly, would never suggest somebody would walk in with a 17% pay raise. I don't think anyone in this province would have believed anyone would show up and then never move and want to go to arbitration.
If
Most
it's so
reasonable
unreasonable,
people
would
would
an
expect their
arbitrator not
employer-
have ruled against them?
I have no idea. That's the challenge. You go back and look. We don't know that.
But Premier,
You've heard people suggesting their government has the capacity to do all kinds of things with money, raise taxes, all of those things. Arbitrator doesn't take into the account our ability to pay.
Premier
That's
does.
what's frightening.
So if an arbitrator
says that right in
doesn't,
there.
sorry, if I could just finish that, if an arbitrator doesn't take into account the government's ability to pay, why in 2016 did the province enter into a 30-year agreement to give this group arbitration rights?
Because we never thought, to be perfectly frank, that they would walk in with this kind of an ask. A 17% and never prepared to move and never prepared to use that clause, quite frankly, to go around collective bargaining. There was no collective bargaining. They were using that clause to go directly to arbitration.
Premier, the agreement says right in it that the arbitrator is to take into account the public's ability to pay. You just said that's not the case. What are you saying?
Because we have not seen an arbitration, in my view, that has reflected the province's ability to pay. This province has continued to end up in a position where any growth they've had in the economy has gone through collective bargaining, through arbitrators being able to disseminate that how they see fit.
So why
the
did you
reality
ever
is
sign
we
such
need
an
to
agreement?
in no way would anyone have believed that they would have walked in with 17% and not be willing to move. That's not that they used that clause, quite frankly, to circumvent collective bargaining.
Premier, you say most people would look at a 17% wage request as being unreasonable, but wouldn't most people also look at an employer reneging on a contractual agreement as being unreasonable?
Most people believe that my role as the Premier of this province is for all Nova Scotians.
I
and there
don't
are some
dispute
difficult.
that, but how many of those people, all of those people you
Mike,
represent,
I appreciate
how
you-
many of
if-
those people
if
would
you-
expect their employer to renege on their contract?
So what most people in this province would expect me to do is represent all Nova Scotians. It's not about, quite frankly, me. You may not like my answer. The reality of it is I have to protect all Nova Scotians,
I'm trying to get
not just those
it's
at
not
the
that I
bargaining table.
dislike your answer, Premier. I'm trying to get you to justify what's going on here, because the public is going to look at this and wonder, what agreement are you going to sign that you're willing to completely abide by, or will you only abide by agreements so long as they work for you and your government?
I think, and I've been hearing from the public, who tells me that a 17% pay raise is simply unacceptable and unreasonable. What I've provided is that I've enforced, contrary to what's been reported, this bill does not force a contract on people.
Are you prepared to give them more than 7%?
This provides them. We go back to the bargaining table. And actually, if you go back and look, and if they walk through the step adjustments that we've had, they would actually all be receiving more than that. That's the reality of what we did at the bargaining table. But I cannot allow this bargaining unit to hold the taxpayer hostage. That's what's taken place. They used this clause, quite frankly, to go directly to arbitration, and that was there was no free collective open bargain. We came, made adjustments at every step of the way. They stayed put and said, let's go to arbitration.
What do you know about the legality of that?
Constitutional? Is Bill
Yeah,
203
we believe this.
What do you know about the
Are you
legality
on what
of
basis?
Are you
going back
prepared-
against the agreement?
Pardon?
What do you know about the legality of going back on the agreement?
I'm not sure. We believe that it's sound legally. We're providing them, if you know, workers have the right and need the right to ensure that they have some way if they don't agree with their employer. There's all kinds of those. We're providing this through the right to strike.
If it's
Premier, a number of
constitutional, are you
cases-
prepared to refer this to the Court of Appeal as a reference case, just to make sure that it's constitutional and to demonstrate that it's constitutional?
We're very confident in our bill, and we're looking forward to having it passed.
Premier, a number of cases were thrown out, a number of cases were dismissed yesterday as a result of not having Crowns there to present their case. Who bears responsibility for that?
All the more reason we need essential service legislation. It is very clear. When you go through, I go back to this very thing was said today, the issue with healthcare workers had the right to strike without essential service. We leave it up to the employee to determine what's important, what isn't. The fact of the matter is that's a negotiation that has to happen, and that would be what would happen. And they made the case yesterday, quite frankly, of why we need essential service legislation.
But whose fault is it, Premier, that these cases were thrown out?
That's an illegal strike. They chose to walk the street illegally. They have to tell that to the victims of those crimes.
How come you
Earlier today, your minister suggested that the Crowns were putting their own greed ahead of the best interests of victims. Do you stand by that statement? Do you condone that?
What the minister expressed is the reality of it is we have a 17% pay raise and they're in an illegal strike. When victims of crime were expected to have support in court yesterday, they didn't.
But do you agree with him that they're putting their own greed ahead of victims?
There's an illegal strike happening in this province, over 17%, when victims of crime are waiting for people to be in court with them. Let your listeners make up the decision. An illegal strike for us for an increase of 17%, while victims of violent crimes, in some cases, were sitting in court waiting for support.
It's your view that it's illegal, though, right?